If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of three. Inside my online program, Fitness Mama, I just love helping support women to care for their bodies during pregnancy, prepare their bodies for birth, and support their after-birth recovery, helping them feel confident and strong inside out during this important stage of their lives. In this podcast, join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth, and postnatal recovery, helping you through every step of the journey. It is absolutely possible to feel amazing and confident in our bodies during this motherhood journey, and I want that for you. Come and say hi to me on Instagram at @fitnessmama, and let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. Self-care tips for mothers. Let's talk about it. Self-care and self-compassion are paramount for new mums, older mums, pregnant mums, parents in general. So this episode is all about giving some practical tips to help with busy or sleep-deprived mothers, but also we're going to discuss the why. Why is this so important? So I thought there was no better person to chat about this topic with than Renee White. So Dr. Renee White is a fierce champion of creating a village for mothers and their families to thrive postpartum. And she believes that once mothers are properly cared for, so are their babies, and the ripple effect into the community is invaluable. Renee is passionate about supporting sleep-deprived and overwhelmed mothers through her private practice, Fill Your Cup Postpartum Doulas. So since founding the company in 2020, she has grown the doula village to 15 members across Melbourne, Hobart and Sydney, supporting over 80 families in their postpartum recovery. In addition, she is the founder and host of the Science of Motherhood podcast, where she interviews key opinion leaders and researchers in the field of pregnancy, birth and motherhood. So you're going to love this episode. Do stick around. Before diving into this episode, I do just want to thank you all for supporting this podcast along the way. It is now over 2.5 years old. We've released more than 170 episodes, and this podcast is now listened to in more than 100 countries around the world. So thank you, each and every one of you, for all your support, for listening, for sharing this with all your pregnant friends too. And also thank you for the ratings and reviews this podcast has received over the years, because sharing, rating and reviewing this podcast is probably the most important way to help this podcast reach more people. So if you haven't yet rated and reviewed, I invite you to do so. If you're on Apple Podcasts, you just go and you scroll all the way back down to the bottom where you can see the stars. So thank you, everyone. Let's dive into this episode, Self-Care Tips for Mothers. Renee, thank you so much for joining me on the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. This is the second time we are chatting, so it's great to have you back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kath. It is an absolute pleasure, and I love coming onto this podcast and just chatting with you in general.
I know, we've been speaking for half an hour and we're finally hitting recording, so that's a good thing. Now, today we're talking about self-care tips for mothers, and I think it's a perfect time to be talking about this because I feel nowadays more than ever, we all need this. We're all craving it, and whether or not you're pregnant, you've got a newborn, or your children are, 10 years old plus, I think this episode's I'm really excited to chat.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's one of those things where more often than not we talk about it, and it becomes, I think, front and center when we become mums, and that newborn life, we become so self-sacrificing. We are typically the primary caregiver, and so we lose that opportunity to just sit on the couch and, not watch Netflix and order Uber Eats and have opportunity for self-care because we are tending to our beautiful babies and we get that burnout. And I think self-care and the prioritizing of it, as I said, comes to the forefront when we become mums.
And we will go into that. Like, I know that self-care doesn't always mean having a bath all by yourself or, it means something different to everyone. So we will get into different types of self-care. But let's start off. First, I'd like to ask and this might seem basic question, but why is self-care and compassion so important, particularly for new mums?
That's a really great question. I love always starting with the whys, because I think the word self-care, it can be a bit of a buzzword and people think, don't be ridiculous. Of course, self-care, I don't have any time to do that. But I think one of the whys, and, as a scientist myself, I always go back to the data, right? Always go back to the data. And it's really interesting. So, for example, this year, Liptember, which is a fantastic charity that looks at women's mental health, they released a survey results this year, and according to their research, women who experience pregnancy or who have given birth are also likely to live with body image issues. So 50% of women, 31% experience perinatal anxiety, 29% perinatal depression, and 23% experience PTSD. And on top of that, I think, one of the research papers that I think really caught my eye, and this is research that has actually come out of Australia, is that they showed that mothers who take 30 minutes per week, not per day, per week, are 3 times less likely to develop depressive symptoms, which I think is just astounding, because when we have statistics like, 1 in 5 women experiencing postnatal depression here in Australia, and the fact that postnatal depression costs the Australian economy $1 billion every year. When we have research articles that come out and say, if you can take 30 minutes per week to yourself, you are 3 times less likely to develop those depressive symptoms. Why are we not prioritizing that as a society? It just absolutely astounds me.
Wow, because that was one of my questions is self-care, as you said, is a bit of a buzzword. And I was wondering if self-care was a bit of a Band-Aid solution to all these, like all those stats you were just reading about with depression and postnatal anxiety and all the rest. But the fact that there's that research is great.
Absolutely. And I think, whilst there are some fantastic organisations around, the support and treatment of postnatal depression and or anxiety, that's great. But I would argue, why are we not fighting for the front end loading of looking after our mothers before they become mothers, before we get to that P&D and postnatal anxiety? Why are we not front loading the care there rather than try to Band-Aid and put a fix on all of our mums experiencing those horrible, disorders?
Oh, it's so great we're chatting today for this, because it is so complex, isn't it? Like there's stuff that governments could be doing, there's stuff that communities can be doing, there's stuff that we can be doing, there's partners. Like it's just it is a deeply layered situation.
It is. It's absolutely deeply layered. But I think it's about, first and foremost, prioritizing mothers. We're a very undervalued group of individuals, not only here in Australia, but across the world.
Yeah. Okay. So with that in mind, what are 5 ways, or not 5, what are some ways, I like number of 5. I don't know why, I like odd numbers. 3,
go
5.
for it.
It could be 4. What are some ways that self-care and compassion, first of all, compassion and self-care, are they different? Are they the same? What are we?
Good question. I think to me, it's almost like chicken and the egg, right? Because I think one of the things that people, and I think women in particular, I'm definitely one of these women, is you've got to have compassion for yourself in order to prioritize your self-care. And then when you get that self-care, you demonstrate compassion to yourself as well. You are telling yourself that you are worth self-care. And I think that is one of the first things that needs to happen, because as I said, in the beginning, more often or not, that like we as mothers, like just put ourselves so far down the list, so far. And I look and think to myself, we have so much compassion for our children, our families, our community, but where is the compassion for ourselves? And it is one thing that I have definitely learned in the last 6 years of motherhood. I was the classic self-sacrificer. It didn't matter whether I was feeling like completely burnt out and that I could not literally keep my eyes open. If my daughter needed something, or, I felt so compelled to, teach her new things and take her to new activities and be the best mum that I could. But really what I needed to start doing was role modeling to my daughter that I needed time out. I needed time for self-care because, and this is why I called my business Fill Your Cup. It is, if your cup is not full, then how are you going to assist the people around you? So I think they are two different things, but they are so uniquely linked together.
Yeah, love that. And I love the name of your Fill Your Cup. It's just, it's everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some ways that self-care can help mums? Like, we hear that it's important, but how is it actually going to help us by giving ourselves self-care and compassion?
Yeah. So I think when I like to talk about self-care, I think I like to talk about the different effects that it has on us, our physical, our hormones, our emotional, like what is actually at play there. I think that's really important to note because, so for example, like the physical nature of self-care, we all know that our bodies go through this amazing transformation during pregnancy and birth. We are effectively running marathons through pregnancy. It's an amazing fact that I know gets pushed around social media a lot, but for those who haven't heard it, and I'm going to read it off my notes because I want it to be really clear about this. So the research has actually shown that pregnant people are basically endurance athletes. We are all running a New York City marathon, right? So just for context, the maximum a human being can sustain is 2.5 times their basal metabolic rate, or their BMR. People have probably heard of the acronym BMR. So 2.5 times. Pregnant people average 2.2 times their BMR for approximately 280 days. Not a single day of a New York City marathon, but 280 days. So that is an amazing feat in and of itself. So we go through pregnancy, our BMR is absolutely through the roof. Then we go through what could possibly be a marathon or a sprint of birth, whichever way you want to take it. And then just that extra layer on top, we've got to endure sleep deprivation. If you choose to breastfeed, that's another layer of, energy expenditure, all of those things. And so for something like self-care, you need to get horizontal as quickly as possible and for as long as you possibly can. So, in terms of how do you actually do that, you have to call on your village. You absolutely have to call on your village, and you have to get really comfortable with that, because you should not be buzzing around your house, entertaining visitors and, tending to other people's needs. If you've got toddlers already in tow, call on people to help you with that. Like, we know toddlers are like Energizer bunnies. Like it's just so hard to manage that all. So in terms of self-care and your physicality of your body, you have to rest. So that means you're going to have to call on other people to help you.
I'm going to be
The devil's advocate.
Yeah. Because I heard this all the time, and, I've had 3 children now. But I think it took me my 3rd child before I actually realised I needed to do this. And I really think that matrescence is the term given in terms of becoming a mother. And like I know for my 1st and 2nd, I almost for me, you just can't overnight let go.
No.
I don't feel you can just suddenly switch off, to go from being so busy and independent and to just suddenly just letting it all go. For me anyway, it was a process. It took years. And because you hear all this, but I distinctly remember with my firstborn, I was like, I can have a shower by 8, before my husband leaves the house, and, get up and about, and I'm going to be doing the laundry at 10 o'clock. And I just remember thinking, I've got this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you got there and you were like, I ain't got this. Right?
I haven't got this anymore. It went somewhere.
It's such a gut punch as well, because I think we have these crazy preconceived thoughts. And I'm going to throw society under the bus and say, shame on you for making mums believe this. Shame on the people who push out the narrative of the super mum. We were not meant to be mothers alone. We just weren't wired for that. And it is so crazy that I myself had the exact same ideas, that, I was going to be like, okay, the baby's going to sleep for like ages. I'm going to have time to cook a meal. I'm going to put the washing on, all of those things. And then you're just like, holy guacamole, I don't even know what my name is today. How am I going to do this? And it's absolutely one of the things that we talk about in all of our postpartum planning sessions with our doula clients, because more often than not, and it's typically first-time parents because they've never done it before, around how are you going to do this? And one of the number one pieces of advice I give them is you need to start getting comfortable with asking for help during pregnancy. And that is, in and of itself, incredibly difficult for some people. I need to acknowledge that. It's really difficult for people who are introverts in particular, and I have worked with a number of people in that kind of category. And it is just something, and you've touched on this, that you have to practice. It's like a muscle movement. You have to continue to practice and flex that muscle over and over again, start to become comfortable with it. And if you can't have those conversations yourself, then my next piece of advice is always look to your inner circle. Who can you trust to have that conversation with and say, look, I'm really struggling with this, but I know I need help. Can you help me and advocate for me for things like that?
What you say does touch on something really important, because I think asking for help is easy if you've got trusted people around you. But I know my mum had just moved to Australia, didn't know anyone, had no family. When this is when she had 4 children under 5 or something ridiculous. And so she just did it all herself. And I guess I've grown up watching her just doing it all herself. And I know a lot of people listening today are in similar situations where they just don't have the family support. And it is hard asking sometimes friends for help when they're also busy and they're also going through the same thing. So
this episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
Yeah. That is a really tough, it's a really tough circumstance. And I want to talk about two things there. First of all, you touched on the fact that you saw your mother as that role model, and we need to reflect, and this is what I do get a lot of our mamas to reflect on, is what is the imprint on you of your own mother? You know, I think the majority of us in this generation had mothers who were extremely self-sacrificing, and that is what we saw. And so, you know, they've set the bar really, really high. So first of all, you need to look at that. What is your imprint? How does that look for you? How does that sit for you? And if that's something like we've seen for many generations, that self-sacrificing mum, what are the things that you're going to do to kind of change that narrative for yourself? And I think, you know, more often than not is that classic, you know, look to your community. There are great organizations like mothers groups, and, you know, Rhyme Time is somewhere where you can meet new mums. It was something I spoke about with a client the other day. Rhyme Time, libraries, community centers, toy libraries, all of those things are opportunities for you to meet other mums within the neighborhood. I was definitely one of those mums who moved to a new neighborhood when I was 32, 33 weeks pregnant. I didn't know a soul. I didn't know that, you know how there's that local cafe that all the mums hang out at? I didn't have a clue where that was. Facebook is an amazing opportunity. Typically, there's a mums group on there. And the other one that we actually recommend is what I call the Tinder app for mothers, which is Peanut. Because for a lot of mums who are in rural areas, or for introverts, I find, who struggle to have those kind of initial conversations, Peanut can be an amazing opportunity to connect with other mums and not have that crippling feeling of like, how am I going to approach that person in real life? Yeah. So, yeah, that, I guess that's kind of the physicality around it all. But in terms of hormones, like, I don't need to tell you, Kath, like the hormone changes in women during pregnancy alone are crazy. But after the birth of our placenta, we actually break Guinness Book World Records for the fastest drop in hormones that a human body can undergo. And that's kind of that feeling of like, holy guacamole, what is happening here? So I guess in terms of self-care, you really need to start re-equilibrating those hormone levels again. We know day 3, day 4 is typically that thing where it sets in around baby blues. And, you know, I've heard stories about people saying, you know, the something came to the hospital room, like someone bought some flowers in that they didn't like, and they just started crying. They're like, what's going on? You're like, I don't know. I'm having this like out of body experience. I definitely had those moments where I'm like, I just need to cry about like whatever is happening in my life. But I guess in terms of self-care, as I said, regulating those hormones is so, so important, because we've got to think about, you know, in particular, women who want to breastfeed. We want things like prolactin and oxytocin to be kicking in. If we are in this fight and flight mode where our sympathetic nervous system is still, you know, in play, those things are not going to be able to kick in. They need to be down-regulated for our oxytocin and prolactin, which are the two fundamental hormones we need for bonding and for feeding our babies. So I guess in terms of self-care, you want to start thinking about, how am I going to rest? How am I going to nourish my body? You would know all about nourishing bodies. And, how am I going to kind of enhance that mother-baby bond as well?
Well, let's go on to that nourishing bodies, because I know you've got some great tips for mums, new mums.
Yeah.
How are some easy ways that we can nourish our bodies?
Oh, man.
From a dietary perspective.
Yeah, I guess from a dietary perspective, and I think this is like one of those misnomers where people also, like, I think it's known, physical recovery is something that is always in play, and we know that the food is the fuel for our bodies. But what people also don't understand is that that fuel and certain micronutrients are so critical to our mental health as well. And so that is something that I'm extremely passionate about as a biochemist.
And I can see this with my children. If they're not appropriately fueled, like if they're hungry or they haven't had good, protein or something, they get hangry. Their whole mental health, the world's doomed.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And then I give them food and they're very happy again.
Yes, absolutely. And it's that classic thing with kids where you're like, are you hungry? Are you tired? You check it off the list, all of those things. But I think for me, I've probably got 5 micronutrients that I think are really, really important for that postpartum recovery. The first, iron. Like, I am obsessed with iron. Iron, for, all of those people playing at home, obviously increases our energy levels. It's part of our red blood cells. It's the thing that holds on to, oxygen and enables oxygen to kind of move around our bodies. We lose a lot of blood during that process of birth, even more so in C-sections. And so it is so critical for mothers to, get as much iron as they can into their bodies as quickly as possible. I am a huge advocate for obviously making sure that everyone knows what iron's best friend is. It is vitamin C. So, if you are having, levels of iron that need to be supplemented, make sure that you're having, your steak with a carrot or a glass of orange juice or something like that. The second micronutrient that I'm a huge fan of is collagen, because we all have our beautiful babies and our tummies stretch out, and we've got that kind of tissue connectivity that's all been stretched. Our uterus is stretched. That's got to be coming back in. Pelvic floor. Shout out to pelvic floor. Absolutely. So the collagen is going to essentially be the building blocks for that connective tissue and your skin. And, I want to say that this is not about getting your body to bounce back. It's just about, repairing your body after pregnancy and birth. So obviously things like bone broth are just outstanding. Slow cooked fatty meats like, pork and ossobuco.
And for the busy parents listening, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you can get bone broth from good quality fruit and veg stores. They often sell it.
Oh, yeah. Yes. There are some fantastic opportunities out there for people who, don't want to be making a bone broth for 6 to 12 hours, cooking on their stove. Having said that, though, I have finally fast-tracked my bone broth recipe, which is I use a pressure cooker now, and my bone broth is done in 90 minutes. So if you can do that, great, but I think out of a jar can be as good as well.
Don't you have to then sift off? Shows how long it's been since I've made bone broth. But isn't there all this scum at the top that you have to sift off? And
so for me, I will do this pressure cooker, and then I will sieve it and then, skim it off once it's kind of settled and things like that. So I think that in terms of degrees of, bone broth cooking, it's that overnight, or you can do pressure cooker, or you can get it from a jar.
And what type of bones do you get?
What I do is if we have like a barbecue chook from, the local grocer. You take the meat off that, and I will just pop it in the freezer for later, and then I will put all the bones and everything like that into my pressure cooker to use for later. And then I'll add like chicken necks or something, like they can be raw chicken necks. That's the chicken bone broth. Yeah.
Because I think correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the raw bones that are the best, right? Not boiling already cooked bones.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But if you are trying to fast track and, be resourceful with with whatever you've got, then yes, absolutely. I would use, I used to, back in the day, chicken feet are an amazing, I know. It's so, and I think that's why I really like the pressure cooker method, because I just like throw everything in, put the lid on and go, see you in 90 minutes. But you can use beef bones as well with the bone marrow and things like that. Roast them. I typically roast them for about 15, 20 minutes beforehand. And then I pop them into the pressure cooker.
Okay. Like ossobuco?
Yeah, ossobuco, and just those kind of long marrow bones. Get your butcher to kind of chop them up so they'll fit into your pot.
Right.
But, yeah, all of those beautiful, like, great gelatinous bones.
I think I might just go to the fruit and veg shop, Renee.
You can. And, look, you know what, Kath? I do that. I typically have a jar of it sitting in the fridge, and I'll pop it into spaghetti bolognese, or if my daughter, and I don't know about your kids, but my daughter is just like obsessed with carbs. So if I'm like, got mum guilt, which I typically do, I'm like, oh my God, she just wants a bowl of dinosaur pasta, then I'll actually put some bone broth in the water that I'm cooking the pasta in, because that will then actually seep into the pasta. And so I don't know, that's just me checking my box of mum guilt.
I love that. And so that would be one benefit of just cooking up a huge quantity, because then you could freeze it in the little ice cube.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So any opportunity that I can slip some bone broth into my kid, I do. I take it.
Oh, that's good. Maybe I'll start doing that with my bolognese sauce.
Yes. Or if the other one that I love doing is, because I know a lot of people don't like handling liver. I personally don't. I think it's gross, is that I get my butchers to make up a special liver mince with grass-fed beef, and you cannot tell the difference at all. And so that's like the ultimate. But then if you're going to I don't have time to go to a butcher, but I want to get a bit more iron into my diet, just go get some free-range duck liver pate and throw that into your bolognese. It's great. Extra flavour, nice high in iron, and it's really convenient as well.
Going back to what you just mentioned, oh my God, you can tell I've not had much sleep last night. What were you talking about just before the duck liver pate?
The mince?
The liver mince.
Yes.
Sorry, everyone. Okay. So going back to the liver mince, because usually I use beef mince.
Yes.
Would you just put a little bit of liver mince just to add to the beef mince, or would you only use liver mince? Because that would be a bit strong, wouldn't it?
No, I would never just use liver mince. So I had an amazing butcher in Melbourne, and I always plug them because I absolutely love them. They're called Canning's Butchers. Have you heard of them? They would be around the corner from you, Kath. They've got multiple outlets, but they are our preferred butchers for Fill Your Cup. So we get all of our meat from them for all of our clients. And I remember going in and saying, Sam, I'm looking for like a mince with like liver or like, something like that. He's like, oh yeah, that's our paleo mince. And I was like, what? So you can just jump on their website. It's 80% lean grass-fed beef mince, 15% grass-fed beef fat, and 5% grass-fed liver. It's frozen, so you can just pop it in the freezer and, grab it out whenever you want to. But then when I moved to Tasmania, I went to my local butcher and I said, can you make this for me? Because I have clients here in Tasmania and I really want this mince because it's so, so good. We actually make our sweet potato cottage pie out of it, and it is just divine, Kath. It just makes you feel so good. And a lot of our mums who I guess maybe they've experienced hemorrhaging or C-section, this particular dish is one of the things that we pop on the menu for them straight away, just to kind of get that extra boost of iron.
I love that. One of my daughters is low in iron, so I'm always trying to
go for
and
it.
I am
she won't know.
Yeah. That's okay. So that's amazing. So everyone go to your butcher, get a little 80% mince, 15% fat, 5% liver.
5% liver. Yeah. Just you wait and see what happens.
I'll let you know.
So
and
do you
also
want me to
the duck liver pate as well, because that would be really tasty and yummy, and I can imagine it would add that bit of saltiness to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually, again, it's kind of one of those mum hack things that I just, recommend to a ton of mums. If you don't like just eating pate by itself on some nice, crusty bread or something like that, then just throw it into the bolognese. Bolognese is it's like the place where everything goes, hidden veggies, hidden liver.
Amazing. If I could give my kids bolognese 5 days a week, I would.
I feel like when you've entered a house of a mother, because there's always like 2 or 3 stocks of bolognese in the freezer. Like that is my absolute go-to.
Okay. We've totally digressed.
I know, totally digressed.
I love it though. Best bolognese hacks ever. Maybe that's what I can call the podcast. Bolognese hacks for mums.
Yes, absolutely. Do you want me to quickly run through my last 3 micronutrients that I think are super, super important? Because
absolutely,
I think in terms of these ones are the real, I think, clinchers for mental health as well. So, for example, DHA or omega-3. So studies have actually shown that an adequate intake of DHA may lower the risk of developing postnatal depression. So, there's still research that needs to be done around that, but, there's research there. Foods like seafood, grass-fed beef, eggs, they're the sources that you're going to be looking for. And studies have actually found that infants of mums with higher DHA concentrations in their milk have better neural and visual development as well. So that's also a good one. Other one that often gets lost and I think is really important is vitamin B12. We don't really hear about this a lot, but B12 is required for red cell development. It's kind of plays into that iron thing as well, energy production. And they've actually shown that if breastfeeding, B12 aids in brain, behavioural and muscle development for your baby. So that is a really, really important one. You're looking at food sources like fermented foods, like a sauerkraut or something like that, liver, eggs, mushrooms, some dairy and obviously red meat. And then the last micronutrient is zinc. This is like so, so important for immunity, like, wound healing. I think a lot of people during cold and kind of flu season, they'll obviously go for a vitamin C and a zinc or a magnesium tablet or something. So this is obviously essential for wound healing, immunity, digestion, hormonal regulation as well. And it actually, they've shown that deficiencies can lead to a lack of alertness and sugar cravings. So if you're one of those people and you're like, oh my God, that 3 p.m. I need sugar, then reach for something like, and this is not for everyone, shellfish. So
reach for shellfish at 2 a.m., ladies.
Yeah. Chicken, legumes and nuts. So, grab a handful of nuts instead.
Brazil nuts are good, aren't they?
Yes, they are. So, that's my biochemist spiel of what you need to pack into your diet after the birth of your baby.
And beyond.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. Postpartum is for life, people.
But I know, I'm looking more and more into, women's health in the 40s and 50s and beyond. And that's when we have another change in the hormone production and, Pregnancy, postpartum and menopause are two massive stages in a woman's life. And all of this that you're talking about, I can imagine, will be just as important for those perimenopausal years too.
Oh,
which
absolutely.
is just on our doorstep, ladies. Sorry.
Speak for yourself, Kath. No, I'm definitely just on the doorstep. No, I think it's really important because, I know there is no hard research around this because obviously the funding in women's health is not where it needs to be. But anecdotally, people say that, the first 40 days after birth will dictate the next 40 years of a woman's life. Because if you do not take the time to nurture and nourish your body, you're going to have to pay for it sooner or later. Like, it's just the way it works. So, yeah, investing in your well-being, your self-care, your nutrition now is going to pay dividends later.
Yeah. It's a trifecta.
It is.
Your nutrition, your physical self, and then your mental, emotional well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, to finish off with some quick fire tips, self-care tips for new mums.
Oofed. The first thing I guess I always say is, and I've touched on this already, is getting comfortable with asking for help. You need to start identifying what those needs are. Write them down. Actually physically write them down. Do you need help with childcare? Do you need help with household chores? Do you need, what is it that you need help with so you can allocate that time that you would otherwise be doing those activities for self-care? Because if you hear from people like Eve Rodsky, who's an amazing New York Times bestseller, she writes about in her book Fair Play that we are not physicists who can, screw with the space-time continuum. There's no such thing as making time. We cannot do that. So we have to allocate time otherwise. My next tip would be communicate. You need to communicate. It's all good and well it being in your head that you need to do these things, but you need to be able to communicate with your partner, your family, your friends, whoever that is, and explain to them what support you actually need. Because we always hear that, our partners, and my husband does this, he's like, of course I can help you, but you need to let me know. Like, I'm not a mind reader. But sometimes it's really hard to have those conversations. And so I guess that flows into my next tip, which is you need to be really specific with what it is that you need. Those vague, I know I've done it, like those hands up in the air, vague, like, oh my God, I just need some time. I just need some space. And it's like.
That's me at the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know what I need.
Exactly. And I think we get so overwhelmed where we're just like, oh my God, I just need a break. I just need a break. But we do. We need to clear the slate and we need to be really specific. It needs to be, you there, I need help doing this particular chore. And I know I'm going to sound really stereotypical, but I think for men, definitely my husband, he needs specific directions because otherwise he's just like cruising around the house doing nothing. And so I'm like, I need your help to do dinner tonight, or I am going to we do this on the weekends all the time. We kind of check in with each other at the start of the weekend or like Friday night, and it'll be like, okay, what is it that you need to get done this weekend? And so we're both really clear on like what these expectations are. And I'm like, I need to do work for 2 hours on Saturday afternoon. And he's like, okay, great. All right, we'll clear the deck for that. And then I'm like, okay, well, what do you need to kind of have your self-care or, work or whatever that is? Being really clear on what those specific things are. And then that goes to plan ahead. You plan it like you were going to a haircut. Plan it like you had booked in a maternal child health nurse appointment for your kid. You need to plan it and write it down. Absolutely. And I guess, utilizing your support system is so, so critical during that process. And I think the last thing I would say is setting your boundaries is really something that comes into play as well when it comes to self-care, because more often than not, when we start to flex those muscles and go, hold on a minute, I need to prioritize myself, you might get a bit of pushback from some people. And so being really clear with what your boundaries are and that you deserve to have that time and self-care for you is critical.
Love that. And I was going to ask you, because that was for some quick tips for new mums, and I was going to ask you for some self-care tips for busy mums, but they're probably all, like what you just said was perfect for busy mums too, right?
Yeah, I think they're probably perfect for any mum at any stage. In terms of new mums, the thing that I would probably add on to that is to be really kind to yourself, because those newborn days are incredibly difficult. And so whilst I've already premised the fact that, you know, there's studies around, you know, taking 30 minutes per week, you know, can reduce your likelihood of postnatal depressive symptoms times 3. Something that I always get our mamas in Fill Your Cup to do is, I call them oxytocin boosters. And what I get them to do is write down something that is like a self-care activity. I premise it by saying, I want you to think about the person that you were before you became a mum. I want you to think about, what was it that brought peace and joy to your life? Was it sitting down and watching your favorite TV show? Was it taking your shoes off and walking in the grass, or listening to your favorite music album, or whatever that is? And I want you to think about those activities. Now, then what I want you to do is break them down and write them down. Think about an activity that could take 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and 10 minutes. Because when it goes pear-shaped, I want you to default to the 1 minute. When you got a little bit of extra time, go for the 5 or the 10. But as long as you've got those 4 kind of activities that you can leverage off, those are the things that you should be doing on the daily. And I get them to write that list and put it on their fridge. And the other thing that I do is I speak to their partner about advocating and giving mums permission to take time to do those things, because we self-sacrifice and we go, I don't have time, or, you know, Bubby needs this, or whatever that is. And it's like, that's fine. That is probably true. But at the same time, I find as mums, if someone else gives us the permission and the space to be able to do it, more often or not than we do it. So that would probably be my huge tip for those newborn mamas.
Bucket fillers. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Renee. I think you have provided not just some practical, valuable tips, but I know for me it's, as you said, self-care always goes to the bottom of the to-do list. And for me, after today's chat, I'm going to put it a little bit higher up the to-do list and have a chat to my husband tonight. So, and I don't even have a newborn.
Oh, look, you know, it doesn't matter where we are on the postpartum journey. It's still a difficult thing to manage and to be consistent in. Yeah. So, yeah.
And it's forever evolving and changing. And, you know, once a lot of my friends, their kids are now all at school, and so work commitments are picking up, and it's just a whole new ball game. So it's an evolving situation. So it's great to chat. Where can women and parents and people come and find you if they want to learn more about what you do? And
so we're typically on Instagram at fillyourcup_. Our website is ifillyourcup.com. People can learn all about our postpartum services there. We've just opened our books on a new offering called Prep for Fourth. So for mothers and families who are looking to prepare for, you know, life after birth, it's a 2-hour online session with me, and we essentially game plan postpartum, what that looks like. And as part of that, we look at self-care and how that's going to work. So it's a really unique offering that we've got, because it's unique to you and your family. So we actually have like a really quite extensive questionnaire beforehand around that. And we cater and curate to each family, which is really, really good. So, yeah, if anyone wants to learn more about that, they can pop over onto our website and have a look at that. And, yeah, as I said, I'm always on the socials. Feel free to DM me if you want some more info.
And you've got some delicious lactation cookies too.
Yes, we do. So we've got 3 products that fill your cup. Our Choc Goji Lactation Cookie Mix, which
They're
is
amazing.
Yeah, thank you. They're all organic. They're high in protein. So it's a dry mix that you can make fresh at home or, as I say, handball it to someone else to make, which is great.
My 6-year-old made them.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, and she loved it.
Oh my goodness. Well, they're a great lunchbox snack as well. My daughter loves them. So yeah, as I said, high in protein. You're not going to get that crazy sugar spike at 3 a.m. in the morning, which I really suffered from. And then we've also got our creamy coconut dal mix, which again, all organic, high in protein. And then so that's our snack, our savoury. And then, of course, we have our self-care, which is our postpartum recovery sit. So it's a beautiful bath salts with botanicals as well.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Renee. I appreciate you taking time out today. It was great to chat all things self-care, tips for mums and new parents. So thanks for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Kath.
Okay, we'll chat to you soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.